are handcuffs for Native American children. During the infamous Indian boarding school era, which ran from 1879 into the 1970s. 100 years, 490 schools. One of the first schools was built right out here by Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by Army officer Richard Pratt, who in his inaugural speech said that the purpose of the school was that, quote, all that is Indian in the race shall be dead. Kill off the Indian to save the man. Children were forcibly removed from their families, forbidden from using their given names, speaking their language, or practicing their culture. I began economic development in 1978, and while it was development and not education, the Carlisle conventional thinking was still very much alive. Everyone knew that Indians valued cooperation over competition, and they all knew we shared too much. So clearly, the only way Indian people were going to succeed in business was to get rid of the Indianness. Thus began my career in culturally appropriate economic development. I was the first Native American and the first woman doing economic development back then, which basically meant I could write federal proposals and get federal funding. I was off to South Dakota to the Pine Ridge Reservation to do economic development. Now, when I got there, Pine Ridge is also Shannon County, which is, Shannon County in South Dakota had been the poorest county in the United States for the past 60 years. Of the 10 poorest counties in this country, 6 of them are Indian reservations. When you get to Pine Ridge, what you see is prairie, vast, vast prairie. And as you look out over the horizon, what you also see are prairie dogs. Some of those prairie dog towns had between 300 and 500,000 prairie dogs, all making more prairie dogs. By every economic conventional standard, there was nothing to develop. Except every weekend, all the local hunters would pile in their cars, drive out to the reservation, and target practice with the prairie dogs. It was the tribe's main way of keeping the population of prairie dogs from overrunning the reservation. But we had a standing joke in the tribe where one of these days we were going to get really rich starting an Indian whack-a-mole business. So one day, I'm sitting in the tribal council meeting, and the Parks and Recreation director comes in, and we start talking about the Indian whack-a-mole business. I mean, it came up every meeting. This time, we really talked about it seriously, and the tribe passed a hunting code, and we issued hunting permits, $50 a person per season. We made $45,000 profit that first year, and it was the first time ever the tribe had a profitable business. I polished up our financials, got the statements ready, did the trajectory of profits, and off to D.C. we went because we wanted to have 10 hunting cabins for the out-of-state hunters. So we go to the Bureau of Indian Affairs, I show them my charts of profit, and we explain how with the 10 cabins we're really going to be able to do some spin-off economic activities too. And one of the BIA guys jumps up and he says, we're funding motels this year. Here, and he went and got the application packet and he gave it to me. And I don't think we even needed a plane. We were so happy on our way home. We just flew home. I got the application packet, went to my office, opened it up. It was for a 120-unit motel. I'm like, wait a minute. We need 10 cabins. Got the wrong packet. So I called the BIA up, and I remember us, we were there, but we got a 120-unit application packet. We wanted 10 cabins. I said, we're only funding 120-unit motels this year. Well, why not? Let's take a shot at it, So I put the proposal together, and I'm thinking what we're going to need is some really sophisticated marketing to get this hotel filled, because we don't even have enough people, local or tourists, to fill 120 rooms. I'm reading down the application packet, and it says marketing is prohibited. And right below that, it says management expenses are disallowable. About that time, the director of Parks and Recreation walks in and he said, hey, the Bureau's just launched a major prairie dog eradication program, and they funded the widespread application of DDT. Well, they eliminated all of our prairie dogs and just about all of our wildlife. So there we sat. We had no customers, no staff, and now we had no prairie dogs. But we got the grant, right? So I go into the tribe and I say, we've got the funding to build a 120-unit motel. So they vote to build the motel in the most remote village on the reservation because there's nothing else out there. We build the motel and there it sits empty because there's nothing else out there. To the outsider, this just looks like one more monument of failure, proof that Indians can't do business. Like the hundreds of motels, shopping centers, and marinas built by federal funds and scattered across Indian country. But how did we fail? We didn't want the motel in the first place. Yet there it stood, a constant reinforcement to a psychology of failure, the blame directed right at the core of my values, my beliefs, and my culture. I could not accept that my culture was the problem. Federal funding was the problem. That top-down, one-size-fits-all was the problem. It denied any kind of local ownership. It denied the innate brilliance in our communities, our own problem solving. So I went to foundations, and I said, our communities need economic development. And they said, well, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to listen to them. I'm going to follow their problem solving. I'm going to tap into their brilliance. I said, yeah, but what are you going to do? How are we going to fund you if you don't know what you're going to do? I said, I didn't say I didn't know what I was going to do. I said we were going to listen. Finally, I had this empathetic program officer pull me aside, and she says, Rebecca, tell us you've got a multifaceted strategic planning process. So, next time I get the question, I have a multifaceted strategic planning process. Got the grant, and one of our first projects really was on the Cheyenne River Sioux, again, on South Dakota. And they'd come to us and they wanted to reintroduce the buffalo to the reservation. Now, because of long-standing historic inheritance legislation, on a reservation you might have a part of land that your family's interest is in that land, but there's 6,000 other heirs to that same parcel of land, and those interests are undivided. So to get around this undivided interest land ownership pattern we have on the reservations, the tribe said, if you commit your interests to the common grazing for the buffalo herd, you'll get a calf. Now, a calf is worth $640 on the hoof, and you have the choice. You could leave the calf with the herd, and it could grow, and when it became a cow or a bull, it became worth anywhere between $1,600 to $2,400 on the market. In a community where the family's average annual income is $4,080 a year, this represents between a 15 to 50% increase in household income. But a lot more was happening. The buffalo were eating the natural grasses and habitat grew back. The black-footed ferret and the meadowlark returned. And when the herd grew in size, the medicine man was called in order that we could cull the herd and reduce the numbers again to the carrying capacity. The medicine man assured that all of the buffalo killing would follow the strictest of ritual and ceremony and guarantee that none of it would be wasted. The skull, the bones, the hides went to the artists. The meat was chopped up and sent to the elderly center, to the elderly programs, and to the school lunch programs. Even the juvenile courts sentenced the youth to go study the Buffalo Nation because the belief was Lakota Nation had modeled themselves after the Buffalo Nation. So we had an economic development project generating income, increasing household income. We had a conservation and endangered species project. We had a cultural project. We had an arts and crafts project, and we had a youth project. And when we go to the foundations to get funding, they'd say, well, we couldn't get a single foundation to fund it. They'd say, well, is it a youth project or is it a cultural project? Is it an economic project or is it a conservation project? And I go, yeah. You know? Finally, out of frustration, we took our own internal funding and we funded it. 30 months later, the executive director of the Cheyenne River Buffalo Project was awarded the Newsweek Hero of the Year award. Not for just what the project was doing on the reservation, but for the impact it had within the entire state. Something very interesting was happening in these projects. Across the board, people were designing the projects in a way that the goal was clear. The goal was to meet the highest number of needs for the maximum number of people in the community. I want to say that again because this goal was in every single project that came in, as it was designed by the communities, to meet the most needs for the maximum number of members in the community. Look at these maps. They're done by the University of Alaska Sociology Department, and they went out to the same Inupiat village up in Alaska. The one map shows the distribution after a whale hunt of all of the places that the whale meat is distributed within the Inupiat village. It shows the vibrant linkages and the connections and the interconnections and the intraconnections within the community, within the family, within the clan, and among the communities. Now, the other map on the other side is the same Inupiat village, and it maps cash and all the points that cash is distributed within the community. But what we were seeing in this was telling us something, not just the maps and not just the Buffalo Project, but there was something we were finding here about this interconnectivity and how prosperity emerges and how these projects were being designed that I think have parallels within the healthcare system. Medical science is already saying that health is an emergent property. It emerges. You cannot cure the individual in isolation. A healthy individual emerges from a healthy relationship with a healthy society within a healthy ecosystem. Well, I submit to you that prosperity is an emergent property. There is no collection of profitable businesses that will make a prosperous society. The economy, with its linear input-output model, will fail unless it addresses and fixes the larger problem. We began working internationally with indigenous communities in 1997-98, making grants directly to grassroots indigenous groups around the world. Some of our projects, we funded traditional snake bite healers collecting anti-venom in Sri Lanka. We funded the blending of traditional and modern agricultural techniques in Sierra Leone. We've even funded the revitalization of spiritual pilgrimages in Mount Kimbasa in Malaysia. Our grants are small. Our success is huge. We make 250 grants. We've made 250 grants in 58 countries, directly impacting 600 indigenous communities. 1/3 of our grantees, 1/3 of our communities are so grassroots they had never, ever received funding before. We've given away a total of $1.7 million, and these communities have raised $16 million in brand new funding. I'm not here to tell you that we have to abandon Western ways of doing business and aid. I am here to tell you today, with a tremendous sense of pride, that my culture is not the problem. Einstein once said that no problem will be created by the same consciousness, that no problem will be solved by the same consciousness that created it. There's a lot to learn from Indigenous peoples' ways of understanding and relating to the world. Society today faces challenges of epic proportion. We cannot afford to handcuff entire worldviews and eliminate them for our search for solutions. The TEDMED community is a robust community dedicated to imagination and innovation. Well, imagine what combining all the worldviews could innovate. Just imagine the innovation from different worldviews. My challenge to you today is, as you go forth, remember the connectivity to the relationships, remember the interdependence, remember our relations. And we can join our worldviews, and we can create, and what will emerge is a healthy, prosperous society and world.